by Gang Lin, Mike Corrigan, and Joel Moses. Thank you for joining us for this discussion about how to win in a digital first world. Be sure to add your questions to the chat so we can answer them as we get a chance. Now, much has been written about digital transformation, mostly about what the challenges are, but we felt there was a gap in translating those challenges to the next generation of digital IT architecture. So we wrote a book that defines the technical capabilities needed to accelerate digital transformation. The problem we see in general is a lot of people put the focus of digital transformation on customer experience, on new apps, on mobile apps, right? New ways of interacting. And while that is important, it ignores that digital transformation is more than just an interface. It's about becoming a digital business. So, Gang, you've been the big driver behind this idea. So, can you explain what that means? What is a digital business?
Yeah, thank you, Laurie. Yes, today I think digital is a default form for organizations in every sector to conduct business. Corporations use apps and the data to automate customer interactions, improve user experiences, and automate supply chains and so on. So COVID clearly accelerated this digitization process. But just like Laurie, you said there, digital business goes much deeper. And in fact, it requires a much more cohesive digital strategy to drive that. And what does a digital business look like? There are different forms, of course. And but let me share an example, and hopefully you will see it. Um, the World Vision is a one of the largest NGO organizations and um, uh, nonprofit organization to help children, millions of children around the world, and to fight poverty and injustice. I met with World Vision global CIO sometime back, and we talked about the digital strategy he's leading at World Vision. What strikes me the most is not the fact that World Vision has moved all applications to public cloud, but the fact that they are using digital to change World Vision's 70-year-old business model. Um, we talked about this digital connect application that World Vision developed, and through the telemetry and data analytics, this application can understand better the social context of the children and the sponsor and allow them to build more compassionate relationship. The digital connect program is in the center of the World Vision's digital strategy. It actually shifted the focus of its business model from traditionally donor focused, focusing on fundraising, to child focused, focusing on the improvement to the child's life. So this is only happening when you put the application, data, and analytics in the center. And this is phenomena. So imagine a 70-year-old NGO organization using digital to change its business model. So that is an example and power of a digital business.
Yeah, and that's one of the best tech stories, right? I've heard in a long time because it's really a focus on people, on the way we interact, on the way we work, on the way we communicate, and right how we learn how to empathize with each other. It's like it's all about culture. And I think Mike, you've said this many times that one of the secrets of digital transformation is actually that it's about changing culture as much as it is technology. Can you expand on that a bit?
Thank you, Lori. Yeah, I think at the center of all this are humans, and the culture that we build really defines how we operate. And the transforming to a digital business is not about a transformation; it's about a constant change, an ability to operate in a world that is constantly evolving. And a great example about that is in the book is Kroger groceries. Kroger has been for a long time, delivering groceries to people. It's a very, logistics-based business. But when they really started to understand that if they can collect a lot of the right information from what's going on, and they can think about what that information means to, for their people, in both their customers, their suppliers themselves, they were able to reimagine how using that data and transforming their thinking could end up in creating a whole new business for them on terms of the insights around how groceries are used, how customers operate, and the whole arena of how um, a new way to think about themselves has created the ability for them to create a whole new business, to create a better way for their customers to experience with them. And so it really is fundamentally about a transformation of your your thinking and your culture and imagining how you engage with your customers in a different way.
Yeah, and, and I think that's interesting because we hear a lot about, right, how technology changes culture, but usually that's in a negative sense. We don't think about a lot of the positive aspects of how technology has allowed us to change the culture of how we work together, how we communicate, how we do business, and therefore how we can change our business models. For example, during the pandemic, we had a local architecture and electrical engineering firm, right? They design big manufacturing facilities. That usually involves a lot of on-site, in-person, right? Details, measurements, looking through designs. And they couldn't do that during the pandemic. So they actually used VR to recreate how they build those manufacturing facilities and the experience of the customers being able to actually stand inside them and see how they look and are they proper. And that was enabled basically by the internet, which is probably one of the most foundational technologies we have today, and that has introduced a lot of change and continues to introduce more change. Joel, you focus on infrastructure as part of your day-to-day role as CTO of systems here. What are your thoughts on how the evolution of the internet has really impacted organizations and enables this digital transformation journey that they're on?
Yeah, talking about change is entirely appropriate. The only constant is change. That's true in physics as it is in infrastructure design. I think that the main thing that infrastructure and the changes that have been made available to our applications in infrastructure and the internet overlaid on top of that is a shift from what was primarily a fixed or static approach to business. Which was not terribly scalable, didn't deal with the needs of individuals well, maybe groups, but not individuals, to something that's a lot more elastic and a lot more dynamic. That's the most important part, being able to respond to changing conditions quickly, changing conditions for your business and changing conditions for your applications. That's an incredibly important aspect of the new way that we do business here in the world. We of course keep a lot of tabs on how infrastructure plays into elasticity and dynamism, and there are some things that you have to take into account, and the biggest thing is of course complexity. Complexity and change together are difficult to manage, and that's why we wrote the book. We see a way through for a business to fix from to move from a fixed and static technology set to a more elastic and dynamic set, while coping with all the additional complexity that's involved in keeping pace with the technologies that we have coming at us.
And that's very true of infrastructure, but it's also true of the other domains in an enterprise architecture as it exists today. But one of the things that's missing from that enterprise architecture is a lot of domains that are needed to cover some of the things that you've all brought up, like data and telemetry and automation. You've mentioned these things. These are not traditionally part of an enterprise architecture, set of capabilities. So, the pace of innovation and evolution in technology has just been so great, right? It's no wonder that organizations are struggling with all of these different ideas. The architecture that defines them is based on old technology, right? It's nearly 50 years old at this point. And some of what you've also mentioned, the way we operate infrastructure, isn't even included either. Right. So it's a big part of the reason we wrote this book is we saw these gaps and these needs to modernize, right, IT and the architecture to adapt so that you can become a digital business and then keep adapting, keep changing. Gang, you've distilled these changes down to just 6 key capabilities. Can you share those with us?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I think Lori and Joe both touched on the agility side of the modern digital enterprise architecture, why traditional IT architecture is not sufficient to support that. So traditional businesses are supported by a stack of IT technologies that are mostly static and separated from their product and services. And they rely on manual processes to connect those technologies together. And that is not at the speed of a digital service. So this limits the organization's capability to scale, to respond to cyber threats, and more crucially, limit their ability to take advantage of the opportunities afforded to a digital business. So in our book, we argue that there is a need for a digital enterprise architecture. And this digital enterprise architecture builds on top of the traditional IT architecture, but introduce new capabilities. And we summarize the capabilities in this digital enterprise architecture in 6 core domains. The first one is cloud infrastructure and systems, and that could also include the mobile, the front end user side, but it's a layer of very dynamic, agile, elastic infrastructure on demand layer. So the second layer is a set of data and analytics capabilities and the governance associated with it. And as enterprises become more digital, the governance also needs to be agile, and the governance as code. Governance is part of the automation itself. The third layer is dynamic application delivery and development and delivery. So how do you turn a set of application logic into a worldwide digital services, distributed services around the world? So that requires a set of technology at the application delivery and distribution layer. So, and then very often this layer, what is in the build time, the development time, the CI/CD, the dynamic one, and the scaling and the runtime is actually getting closer and closer. So we put this app development and delivery together in this layer. Those capabilities need very fine-grained, high-fidelity observability capabilities to support, to get insights, to figure out what's going hot in certain areas. Imagine behind the digital services, you need to constantly monitor user experience and your SLAs and so on. So that requires the automation, observability and automation, and then fulfilled or supported by SRE operations, SRE style operations. And then last but not least is you need to have an end-to-end cybersecurity capabilities instilled across the whole stack and every area, and with also the governance behind it. Again, governance in the digital world is becoming more and more automated, governance as code. So those are the 6 major areas we see a digital enterprise architecture should possess. And this is the key content in the book. So within the book, we have chapters devoted to each domain area. And if you want to know more, you can read the book.
Yeah, and some of these existed before, right, in the traditional enterprise architecture. So this is not a new concept, it's an expansion, right? It's an evolution, just like technology, in order to expand the capabilities that a business has by, right, re-architecting the technology capabilities that it has. And, I'm particularly fond of the app delivery one, and not just because I wrote the chapter, but, I really like that one. That's a good chapter. Everyone should read that. But, right, app delivery has a profound and very real impact on culture, because it impacts how we communicate, right? How fast we can communicate. Can we communicate? Is the service available? Is it not? Simple things like that we take for granted are actually a core capability to an enterprise today. But I mean, we could, spend all day talking about that, or I could spend the rest of the time just talking about app delivery. I really could, but it's just one of those 6. And while I have other authors here, I'd really like to, get some perspectives on the chapters they wrote and the topics that are, very dear to their hearts here. So Mike, you wrote a chapter on data. And there, it was an excellent example of how an existing construct in enterprise architecture is modernizing, it's evolving. So can you expand on that?
Yes, thanks, Lori. I think one of the things that we realize is, one of the reasons we wrote this book is today, one of the fundamental challenges that the business has is we have to react to what customers need faster. We have to do it in more competitive ways. We have to do it cheaper. And we have to know a lot about what's happening in a very complex system. And you can't do that anymore without really fundamentally looking at data being at the core of how you operate. So, we wrote a chapter on data is the new oil, in that you really need to think about how understanding what's going on is as valuable as sometimes the things that you're actually selling or the services that you're providing. And in fact, the experience that customers have is now, particularly in a service area, incredibly important for them to want to stay with you, to be loyal to you, and to feel that that this service is responding to them. So one of the things we kind of wrote about, and I'll extend a little bit of the conversation we had about Kroger, is when you think about groceries and how to be competitive in a grocery environment, right? The products are very similar, across the ecosystem. The logistics have been worked on for years. So how do you start to differentiate? How do you make better experiences? It's not just whether you can place something better in a store, but it's really about fundamentally understanding how people operate differently, or how your partners in logistics can understand what's happening with customers. So today in traditional, there wasn't a connection between the supplier and the customer. There was the store that represented that. But what Kroger did was they started really understanding and gathering that data. So first they had to figure out how to put sensors in. They had to know what information they were gathering. And from that, they started to figure out that there was unique insights that they could have, that they could actually help back to their partners. And that could give them better ideas about how to actually advertise, which is a whole different business for them. But it came from the same set of information that they use to figure out how to do best placement of products, what their customers are doing. And what we've also noticed, if you watch what Kroger is doing now, this is a standpoint where they've started to grow their business by looking at different ways of serving the customer in terms of how they do checkout. So now they have, 4 different ways they can check out, all electronic, all capturing new information, all understanding their customer better and giving the customer better experiences. In doing so, they're now, as the second largest, most competitive, grocer in the U.S. Right? They've used this as a way of using this data and using it in different ways, has enabled them to grow the business, to grow different parts of the business, and to understand their customers better. And this understanding of the customers and the customer's experience and being able to rapidly respond to it is a huge part of how we have to work in a digital world, and it's constantly changing. There's no slowdown. But behind that, when you get into capturing the data, you have to both know how to capture, how to manage it well, how to deal with privacy, how to secure it. All that information then becomes, incredibly important in terms of your internal compliance and governance that you put in place, which Gang was talking about earlier. So you have to build new muscles and new skills, but it's really, this is the kind of, enabler of a new digital enterprise. And it means that you have to think about a different kind of culture and a different kind of way of constantly evolving. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Lori.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, the focus on data is interesting because data is everywhere. While you were talking about sensors and understanding how things are moving through the distribution process, right? The logistics, I'm thinking about simple things that we experience every day. Where's my package? Right? I can pull it up and I can see where the truck is. I know how close it is. As this package is being delivered, you can actually track it. And that's also true in the digital enterprise. When you start looking at how these domains interact, your application is being delivered, but you also need to collect data from each of the points that data has to travel through. So you understand where it is, how it's performing, right? Where bottlenecks might be. So you're collecting all this data, not just so you can, understand where things are and how they're performing, but then what to do with it. If my sensors tell me that there's a slowdown in that process, what do I do? And that's one of the reasons that SRE operations becomes very important, is because it's a new way to operate, right? Traditionally, we use those signals for this broke, go fix it, right? We don't do this real-time optimization, watching what's going on and then automating the fixes. So there's a natural synergy between all of these. Now, Gang, you've talked a lot about SRE, and it's not just a role, right? It's not just a title people have. It's an actual set of practices. So I was hoping you could go into it, maybe give us an example of what that means.
Yeah, I think you actually open it up well. So as digital services becoming larger and larger, as more and more business embracing and offering those digital services, they need to change the way they support those services. Traditionally, in different vertical industries, the support for that was done mostly through human attention. So think of banking. So yes, you do have some applications, but a lot of support personnel behind the scene to support your banking services and human-centric call centers and other high human intensity way of maintaining the application services. What the digital world has, or the rooted from the internet scale companies like Google, started by them, is find a way to automate the support for the service they offer. And they rely heavily on observability, collecting signals, fine-grained signals, and discover insights of any indication of service deterioration or other abnormalities, and many times let the machine to actually get the resolution or decide this is not so service impacting. I don't need to take a human action on it. Or it gives you a better root cause indicator so that you can react more squarely to solving the challenge or the degradation. So that's where SRE operation was born. It's not meant to replace human. You will still have human operators behind the scene to support the service. But what is different is the ratio between the number of customers and the number of support personnel. And we all remember in the early days, the difference between at the compute layer within traditional enterprise data center, the number of servers versus the sysadmin inside of an enterprise is in the range of 1 to 20 to 1, 20 server to 1, say, support sysadmin versus the internet scale companies. Theirs is over a few thousands, 3,000 to 1 operator. So that difference is because of automation, fine-grained, fine fidelity level of insights, and then the human, they don't need to chase in a reactive way every symptom. So that's the SRE at the beginning. But now the attention is moved more on the digital service level. How do you maintain the service level for your in-a-bank credit card service, which is a geographically distributed nationwide or worldwide service? It's very similar to a internet scale services offered by Google or Amazon. So the digital businesses are learning the arts of SRE. But again, it doesn't mean to eliminate the human elements behind it. And to illustrate this one even to the extreme, I'll give you another example. When we talk about self-driving cars, autonomous vehicle, one would imagine that is totally a hands-free, human-free, no involvement, no human involvement kind of service. Think of a digital service. In fact, it's not. Actually, as Waymo is introducing their fleets in different cities, now they have a few thousands of self-driving cars in different cities there. In fact, one of the focus area for them is to build up their back-end operation capabilities. And that actually sounds to me very much like an SRE style operation to operate on this autonomous vehicle. What do they pay attention to? They are, of course, not going to involve to inject the decision on this autonomous vehicles decision itself, but they are paying attention to the fleet service. For example, some unexpected situations like a passenger may be vomited in the car, and how do you react to that? And that's part of your digital service is damaging lower the service experience of that digital service. So that's what SRE is responding to. So they constantly monitor the fleet, aka a distributed digital service behind the scene. But the ratio is much lower from a user to the support personnel, SRE, to the number of user point of view. So, and that is the essence of SRE. It is the new norm of operating digital services, human behind automation.
And I like the focus on it's about scale. It's not about reduction in humans, right? It's about scaling human capabilities, right? In the 50s, I'm sure we've all seen some black and white TV show where telephone operators are manually switching, right, to connect you to different people. And that was a hard process, and you didn't scale. Today, there's still operators, but they don't manually switch us, but they are involved in making sure that that digital service is available, and they leverage automation and data and information. They do it in different ways. And so they've been able to scale worldwide. I can call anyone in the world right now. I won't because I'd get in trouble because we're doing this, but I could call anyone and it would go through right away. So we are almost out of time, and we've all been kind of avoiding the big elephant in the room. That's security, right? It's always about security. With all the new apps and tools that SREs are going to need, with all the new digital services, the new data, the new pipelines that need to be built, new customer-facing experiences, the attack surface is going to get very, very large, and it's going to be distributed and thrown all over the place. So, we included security as a new domain, that is actually integrated, right? It is very tightly coupled with every other domain because it's that important. And Joel, you've spent some time in your career focusing on security. So I'm going to pass the buck to you to talk about this one.
I'm glad I just had a swig of coffee there. So a good running start at this question. So yeah, I have 30 plus years in cybersecurity. And I want to thank Roland for the question. The impact of cybersecurity risk on digital transformation. I mean, when you shift from static and fixed to dynamic and elastic, it's equivalent to switching from a house whose security you guarantee by locking the front and back door to switching to a house that has 50 doors and you have to lock each one of them, or even worse, 50 houses or 50 houses and 100 tents. This is the type of risk that digital business is exposing us to, the need to do more with less, to cover more in more locations. You know, the cybersecurity professional has to struggle with these things across the domains. They have to cope with the rapid pace of technological change. And that's not just within applications, it's also the technological change that's available to the attacker. They're getting more sophisticated all the time, and it's a challenge to keep up with the attacker. The changing skill sets that are necessary to deal with different types of attacks and attack surfaces, and the cost of the development resources to fix issues when you find them in your broad application portfolio brought on by digital transformation. There's also the rapid increase in data. Data is an overlay as well, and data security is something that we have to worry about. It's traditionally been so, but now there's a rapid increase in the amount of data that's generated inside of a digital business. It far outstrips the solutions and the architectures of the past to cope with. And then on top of all of this, the cybersecurity professional has to deal with the need to maintain and operate new applications built on new technologies alongside the venerable old applications that still hold a tremendous amount of value for their business, right? So all of this taken together is a huge challenge for the security professional. But a consistent approach to architecture and a consistent approach to how you operate the environment using SRE methodologies is a good way to start to tackle these challenges.
Start. I like that, start, because it's really about adapting, right? We can't just say here's a playbook for security or for any of the other domains and say you're done, right? Because there's always going to be new technology that's going to be introduced, new ways of doing things, new exciting advances that we'll want to incorporate. And that's actually part of this process, is not just building a new architecture, a new foundation, but building one that allows you to adapt to both external forces like economic changes, right? Global pandemics, right? Interference, right? Disruptions, and technology changes, right? Edge is new. Hey, how do I incorporate that? So it's very exciting. And I know we could spend the entire day and then some, just diving into each of the capabilities and just how much things are changing. But we can't do that today. So instead, we've dived into just these, capabilities, and we'll do some future episodes to dive in deeper into different capabilities to really expand on them and explore them. In the meantime, folks can grab the book and read more about it, or you can grab the audiobook version and listen to it if you'd like. And we're just we're glad that you've been here and you've joined us for this. And I want to thank the three of you, not only for writing the book, but also for joining us today, on this LinkedIn Live. So I guess thanks everyone, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.